Hello and welcome to our program, The Point World Affairs. I'm your host, Daniel Che. Our program, we delve a little deeper into some of the stories making headlines and turning heads from different corners of the globe. As always, we're joined in the studio by Song Se-reum, Professor of Law from Kyung University. Thank you so much for making time for us again.
Good to be back.
Well, let's get to the point by getting to the key words and the stories you've prepared for us today.
Okay, today's keywords are like no-nonsense ones. You can probably guess what it is. It's May exit, addiction, and Parasite.
Well, let's kick off with the obvious with May exit. Let's take a look at what it's all about.
British Prime Minister Theresa May announced she will step down on June 7th on the heels of her failure to secure Britain's withdrawal from the European Union.
But it is now clear to me that it is in the best interests of the country for a new Prime Minister to lead that effort. So I am today announcing that I will resign as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party on Friday the 7th of June, so that a successor can be chosen.
May and the EU agreed on a withdrawal deal last November after multiple rounds of negotiations, but the deal has never made it through the House of Commons. May tried to get the deal across the line by proposing a second referendum on Brexit and pledging to keep a temporary customs relationship with the EU, but instead it led to her resignation after some senior government members strongly opposed her proposal. Having become the first female prime minister in 26 years since Margaret Thatcher, May emphasized she certainly wouldn't be the last female prime minister of the UK.
Ever since I first stepped through the door behind me as Prime Minister, I have striven to make the United Kingdom a country that works not just for a privileged few, but for everyone, and to honour the result of the EU referendum.
I think things are going extremely
As May offered to step down, key figures from the Conservative Party are showing their intention to run for the party's next leadership. The European Union, meanwhile, hailed May's courage, but reiterated that there will be no renegotiation of the Brexit deal.
Well, she couldn't have come in at one of the worst circumstances to inherit the job in number 10. 40 years of integration with the EU that would require some supreme level of diplomacy, charm, and persuasion. Some critics say she does not possess these qualities.
Right. I think that if you have to point fingers at it rather than the Tories party, I think it's the leadership of May that have failed. She had literally one job, making the Brexit as smooth as possible. But I think that looking back, she tried to please everybody, and in the end, pleased no one. And only one who is a casualty at this point is her. Latest proposal of customs union, involving customs union, if that was proposed earlier, probably would have been a very viable compromise position. But it came too late, and it came after failing 3 times on the vote in the parliament about her proposals. So I think that's why she's done. Compared to the uncertainties that Britain faced 3 years ago, I think it's more, because the next successor probably has a bigger job at this point.
Right. Sometimes it can be detrimental to actually care too much about every person on the floor, on the table.
Right.
Let's move on to the next keyword you have prepared for us today.
Gaming disorder has become an official disease as the World Health Organization passed a new standard that classifies the condition as an illness at a General Assembly Committee meeting in Geneva, Switzerland. The committee unanimously approved the 11th revision of the International Classification Disease, which patches an illness code 6C51 on gaming disorder to treat them as behavioral diagnosis. The WHO cited the frequency of gaming and maintaining one's control over gaming as criteria to define gaming disorder. It said the diagnosis will be assigned if abnormal gaming behaviors are evident over a period of at least 12 months. The revision, made for the first time in 30 years, will take effect starting 2022. It's up to each nation's decision whether to agree to the WHO's classification, but the game industry has criticized the latest outcome.
So the keyword addiction refers to game addiction, designated as an official disease or a condition by the WHO. The impact of it, the shock that's expressed by various sectors of the globe could be clearly felt. For Korea, I think this is especially strong because the industry, whether it's game development or esports, we are pretty big. Some of them are top of the line.
Addiction can take many different forms. You have alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and certainly
coffee addiction.
Right. It could be psychological or a substance. So there is a real concern that this could be something that we have to deal with it very seriously. But on the other hand, let's think about the mild form of addiction in the games. Another way of expressing it is, it's so fun, I spend a lot of time on it, right? So it's a matter of severity, and if you want to point medically, whether it is some condition that the medicine has to take note in terms of psychological or physiological dysfunction, probably you need more study than saying that our kids have a big problem spending too much time on games.
Right. It looks like the WHO might have jumped the gun a little bit too fast. There's still a lot more research that needs to be done before such an official designation should have been made. Let us move on to the final keyword that you have prepared for us today, Professor.
All right. The Parasite.
The 12-day run of the 72nd Cannes Film Festival has come to a close at Grand Theatre Lumiere. 21 films competed for the event's highest honor, the Palme d'Or, at this year's event, and it was announced at the closing ceremony on May 25th that South Korean director Bong Joon-ho's Parasite was unanimously chosen for the top prize.
12살의 나이에 영화 감독이 되기로 마음먹었던 되게 소심하고 어리숙한 영화광이었습니다. 이 트로피를 이렇게 손에 만지게 될 날이 올 줄은 상상도 못했습니다. Merci beaucoup.
Parasite is an all-round, well-received black comedy film which depicts economic inequality between two families at the extreme ends of the economic spectrum. Cannes has handed out its highest honor to an Asian director 2 years in a row, and it also awarded the Grand Prix to a black female director for the first time. A French film outlet, Le Film Français, pointed out the upsurge of women, young people, and minorities was well represented through the award results.
Palme d'Or from the Cannes Film Festival, one of the 3 major film festivals around the world, might be one of many more awards for Parasite to sweep into their bag, apparently. It's receiving rave reviews, just as many of director Bong Joon-ho's previous works. It looks like his genuine love for the craft and dedication to sending a strong message continues.
Right. Congratulations on him. I mean, his lifetime work has been, it's a series of, passions expressed in the form of movie arts. But I do note also that this is a continuation of kind of rise of Korean soft power. I mean, we have K-pops and dramas and movies and books, food. Now, it seems like the Korean culture has something to say and offer to the world, and Bong Joon-ho is the latest one to be recognized by it.
Right. What's interesting about director Bong's films is that they always deal with the everyday man instead of something grand or explosive or something that requires a huge budget or computer graphics.
Right. The attention to details is something that everybody can kind of have an empathy or a common understanding of it. I think that's a strength that translates to the kind of common language to everybody.
Right. I mean, there was a CGI giant pig and train in a post-apocalyptic era, but then the essence of it was the human drama involved.
Right.
The topic of the point is about the U.S. Japan summit meeting. U.S. President Donald Trump paid a 4-day visit to Tokyo on May 25th, the first state visit to Japan since the Reiwa Era began.
この悠久の歴史の中で新たな時代、令和の時代の初の国賓としてトランプ大統領、そしてメラニア夫人に訪日をしていただき、本当に嬉しく思います。
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe showed the world his close friendship with Trump throughout the successful meetings he had arranged for the U.S. leader, including watching a sumo game together, dining with the Japanese emperor, and golfing. In the end, the two leaders confirmed the two countries' close coordination regarding North Korea's denuclearization and pledged full cooperation in solving North Korea's abduction of Japanese people.
I feel that we understand each other very well. We're very committed to each other as nations. So we have a situation where we have the best relationship that we've ever had with Japan.
Despite emphasizing strong and cooperative bilateral ties, there are those who point out that Trump has maintained a firm stance that he will not give away to Japan in trade negotiations. He said the U.S. is suffering insurmountable unfairness in terms of trade with Japan, and that he expects some good news to be announced in August to make things right.
We are working on the imbalance of trade. There's been a tremendous imbalance, and we're working on that, and I'm sure that that will work out over a period of time.
This was the 11th meeting between Trump and Abe. The two leaders are set to chair another round of summit on the sidelines of the G20 gathering in Osaka this month.
Right here.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump traveled to Japan for a summit and much more, judging by the various activities he had on the side. How would you assess this four-day visit?
Well, on surface, both parties wanted to do what they set out to do. Japan wanted to show very close ties with the U.S. and President Trump and Shinzo Abe. They were very close for extended number of days. But on the other hand, it seemed like they both were doing the things regardless of what the common agenda is. Donald Trump repeatedly said something about the trade imbalance and his concerns about the domestic issues away from home. And the Shinzo Abe, having an election coming up, probably achieved just on the video side, the optics side, what he achieved. But judging from some criticism that whether there was a deeper substance of drawing two countries together in many different the world agenda, probably that's lacking a little bit.
All right, Professor, we'll be getting back to you in a short while. But for now, let's connect to our expert from outside of Korea for more insights on the matter. We will connect via Skype with a local expert, Professor Toshihiro Nakayama from Keio University, who is joining us right now. Hello, Professor.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us. How are the Japanese people evaluating the outcome of the recent summit between the two leaders? Are there any noteworthy accomplishments from Tokyo's point of view?
Well, Japanese people understand that Mr. Trump is a controversial president, right? He's very unpredictable. He has his America First, which many countries facing difficulty in trying to sort of, establish a stable relation with the U.S. I guess that's the same with Japan. But Japan had decided to embrace Mr. Trump fully. And in embracing Mr. Trump, since he's not a nuanced president, he's not the kind of president who understands nuance, right? So if you're going to embrace him, you might as well embrace him fully, right? I think that's what Prime Minister Abe did. If you compare Prime Minister Abe with, for instance, President Macron of France, he tried to embrace Mr. Trump with style, right? He didn't embrace him fully. That's one of the reasons he did not quite succeed in, fully hugging Mr. Trump. But whereas in the case of Prime Minister Abe, as I said, he just tried to sort of dive in and embrace him fully. And Japanese public is basically on board, right? People are supporting what Mr. Abe is doing. There are, of course, cynical views, right? There are worries that whether this is effective or not. There's that kind of debate going on in Japan. But then again, if you sort of water down the level of hugging, would that change anything? I guess not. So the understanding of the Abe team and the Japanese people is that if you're going to hug him, just do it totally. So therefore, I would generally say that, the Japanese people is in support of Mr. Abe's approach to Mr. Trump, although I would add that there are cynical views about it.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for that eye-opening insight that you provided us today. Now, Professor Song, it looks like certainly some experts are giving Prime Minister Shinzo Abe high praise for his diplomatic efforts. It's very successful, some would rate him.
Right, not just time, but the handling of the world superpower, namely United States. That's one of the strong suits that Shinzo Abe has displayed in his visits, return visits. This is the 11th time, and the kinds of red carpet and the bright color of the red carpet was very noticeable this time, with the sumo wrestling together, golf trips, and the visit to Emperor. Those things stand out in terms of how close those two parties are. But however, if you're the U.S. Citizen and not knowing about his visit, probably if you just tune into his Twitter feed, you wouldn't have known that he was in Japan. His tweets were numerous, and he was talking about the domestic issues, complaints about the Democrats. Not to criticize what he's doing, but if Japan is showing that much love, his return love was not really focusing on the Japan and the hosts. Rather he kind of did what he always have done, criticizing his opponents, and also not really embracing what Shinzo Abe was saying. He voiced opposition or the indifference to a Trans-Pacific partnership, for example. And even with the trade talks with the U.S. and Japan, he postponed it to probably in some ways accommodate his position because the election is coming up. So the trade talk result will be coming after the election. And that's something that helps the Prime Minister Abe. But he did also say that, well, the schedule is backdated, but it's going to be really tough negotiation. That's what he essentially was saying. So in that sense, overall, as the expert was saying, is an overall success, but it doesn't seem like it's as tight a bond as Shinzo Abe set out to do.
Right. One defining factor in terms of the bond or lack thereof was how he was standing up for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in several instances during the talks.
Right. I guess it shows that how much he wants a deal with North Korea, but at the same time, he's further disrupting the kind of the political order and international relations in this region, but at the same time, adding the unpredictability and the uncertainty about the policy-making kind of apparatus. Do we believe what his aide is saying, or do we have to really wait for his Twitter for a final say?
Right. Still quite the enigmatic leader that many world leaders around the globe are finding difficulty in terms of rolling out the red carpet for. Now it's time for us to spin the globe to some interesting happenings in various corners of our world. Our first stop is Spain.
A 3D printer is spewing out a mysterious brown paste. The paste miraculously is transformed into a steak and ends up landing on a plate. Spanish bioengineering firm Nova Meat has just demonstrated its way of making steak using a 3D printer. The synthesized meat is made out of vegan protein from rice, green peas, and algae fibers, and it has a texture similar to that of real beef or chicken. The fake steak is also rich in amino acid, just like real meat.
Livestock is unsustainable, but also the global population is growing. So there is always a need for more resources and a better management of these resources on the planet.
We look forward to seeing more groundbreaking innovations from 3D printing.
Next, we head over to the UK.
Have you ever imagined yourself wearing an Iron Man suit and taking off whenever you want?
I think I need that.
A British inventor, Richard Browning, built a jet suit that closely resembles the Marvel superhero suit. The suit is equipped with a total of 5 jet engines, 1 on the back and 2 on each arms. In 2017, the jet suit set a new Guinness World Records title for the fastest speed in a body-controlled jet engine-powered suit after reaching a speed of 51.3 kilometers per hour. 80 demonstration flights were carried out in 26 countries in the past 2 years. Most of the test runs were conducted to show how safe the suit operates, but the more recently successful flights indoors and in mountainous terrains are an indication that a one-person flight era is approaching fast.
We head over to the United States now.
Cars in Hollywood motion pictures are a bit different from the common ones parked out in the lot, as they help the heroes chase after bad guys or could travel to the future in a split second. You can find them all in Los Angeles, where an exhibition took place at Peterson Automotive Museum to highlight some of the most symbolic cars in Hollywood films. Some of the most popular automobiles at the event include the cars that were featured in classic films such as Star Wars, Mad Max, and Back to the Future. The fair has provided a chance to revisit some of the most monumental films in cinema history, and of course, to admire the cars themselves.
Next, we head over to the Netherlands.
The European Space Agency has recently unveiled a satellite image showing the current conditions of the West Antarctic ice. The agency says it shows the massive ice chunk melting at a faster pace than what the scientists had estimated. In a study published in April, Earth is losing a total of 335 billion tons of ice a year, 5 times faster than the melting pace in the 1960s.
Notably, we've seen significant losses in Arctic sea ice. We've seen decline in the volume of ice locked up in glaciers. The consequence, of course, is that sea level is rising as water is transferred from ice on land into the ocean.
All of our actions count in bringing a stop to environmental damage.
Our last stop is Australia.
A global car-sharing service company, Uber, launched the world's first submarine rideshare service. The underwater taxi could take tourists down to Australia's Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef on Earth.
We all know that you can see the Great Barrier Reef from space, but from today, you'll be able to see the Great Barrier Reef from the world's very first ride-sharing submarine.
The taxi could dive up to 30 meters into the water, providing the passengers the most comfortable experience while they enjoy the beautiful underwater view. Uber said it came up with a service to endorse the protection of Australia's coral reefs. Each ticket to the exploration costs about $1,000, so it must be extraordinary to say the least.
Not up in the air, not on ground, but underwater submarine. Uber submarine taxis could be quite impressive, but apparently you might want to save that ride for a special occasion because it costs $1,000. Not many people could be able to afford it.
Probably too expensive. I'm a occasional scuba diving. Well, I have to use a past tense. I used to enjoy it. But I think a lot of divers would say if it can go deeper and look at some things that we normally can't see, maybe it's worth it because we're fascinated by underwater lives. But 30 meters, you can do it with the night trucks. Maybe not the normal open water licensees, but you can go without using the Uber taxi. However, for Uber's point of view, this is something that they should do or is well advised to do to show that they are very innovative companies, and this kind of attention-grabbing event probably suits them better.
Speaking of water, the glaciers, we knew that they were gradually melting, but apparently the satellite images reminded us of how dangerous the situation is, the urgency of having to do something about climate change. 3,600 tons per year melting. That is quite disturbing.
Most of the scientists agree on the impact of climate change. There's still a debate as to whether we have to deal with it or not. I think that the fact that the climate change, curbing the climate change requires a restraint on the CO2 emission, that requires kind of curbing some industrial expansions. That means retarding or slowing down a little bit of economic growth. Well, that might be the concern, but I think that we are on this boat, so to speak, together, and climate change and the urgency of it is obvious and have been proven time and time again. So I think this is yet another alarm bell that everybody should take attention to.
Right, to quote a lyric from an old song, time is not a friend because friends were out of time.
Right.
That's all the stories we have for our program today. Thank you so much for coming in and providing us with your insights, Professor Song. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that's all the stories we have for you today. For more, do tune in again, same time next week for a brand new episode of The Point World Affairs. Thank you so much for watching.